Stay awake. I'll do my best to keep you awake. But I'm starting to flag too. Long day. I love having afternoon service at 1 o'clock, but it makes for sometimes a tough time staying awake. So I'll do my best and I'll try to keep you guys up. Okay, Luke chapter 15. We had started this. I'm going to move back a little bit. You guys can see. Luke chapter 15. We had talked not last week, but the week before. What parable were we talking about, William? Okay. He did have a problem with it, didn't he? All right. Luke chapter 15, we had talked about the prodigal son. It's always known as the prodigal son. Some people call it the lost son because that's really what he was. Prodigal means that he was late in returning. Okay. So the idea about the prodigal son, we had gotten through the end, but I kind of want to go back a little bit and revisit the tail end of the parable, and that'll lead us into the second parable. There's two parables here, but oftentimes they're joined together as one. It's like there's a part two, so to speak. All right? So verse 17 of Luke chapter 15, it says, "But when he, the young man, came to himself." What does that mean he came to himself? Yeah. He had an epiphany, right? You know, the idea of an epiphany. Boy, it was, he's thinking to himself and he's trying to figure out, don't know what's going through his mind. But think about how many people are lost, have wandered away from the Lord, and you wonder what goes through their mind. And you think, why would anyone in their right mind leave the Lord's body? Why would they leave the assembly? Why would they? Well, you've answered your question. The answer is in the question. Why would anyone in their right mind? I'm not saying that they're insane. I'm not saying that they have mental issues. I'm saying they're not thinking straight. They're not in their right mind. They have left the assembly. And anyone who knows the truth and leaves it is not in their right mind. They will still be held accountable, but they're not thinking clearly. It makes no sense. I mean, honestly, truthfully, think about what we know about the Lord's body, what we know about heaven, what it took for us to get into it, or what it's going to take for us to get into it, how the process leading up to it. Anyone who would reject that and go away is not thinking in their right mind. Can't be. But anyway, this is what's happening with this young fellow. He's in the field, starving. There's a famine going on. He's starving to death. He's wasted all of his father's money. Everything that was supposed to come to him, and it's all gone. It got so bad that he's eating the stuff the pigs are eating. That's how bad it's gotten. And especially as a good God-fearing Israelite, a Jew, a Hebrew, however they want to refer to themselves, this would have been unthinkable to associate yourself with this unclean animal and to eat the food that it's supposed to eat. That's how bad it's gotten. If it goes to the idea, he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country. I think sometimes this process is kind of overlooked as far as how this works. When it says he joined himself to, it basically means this: I'm giving myself over. I have nothing, whatever you see fit to give me for this. They haven't even agreed upon a wage. It is, I'm throwing myself on your mercy. I'll work for food. I'll work for whatever. I have to have some form of protection. So do with me what you will. So what did he do? He sent him out into the fields to feed the pigs. That was work that no one wanted. Nobody wanted that work. Pigs are, if you've ever dealt with them, and I'm not talking about the nice, clean, shiny ones that you see in people's backyards. I'm talking about this is a pigsty. Filthy, just nasty, and they stink, and basically this is work no one wanted. But he says, I'll do whatever you want me to do in order to survive. That's all I can do. We don't even you just give me what you think is appropriate. I'm not even agreeing upon a wage. I'm not demanding a wage. Just take care of me in some way, shape, or form. So really, if you think about what's happened is he's given up his father's protection, the one who loves him. He's gone into the protection of a man who doesn't know him. He's not a countryman. He's not a fellow Jew, or he wouldn't be keeping swine. And he's not agreed upon a wage. That's how far he's fallen. He is below even the workers in his own father's home. This is no different from someone who has fallen away from the Lord's body. Now, they may not be laying in a field somewhere eating pig food and enjoy, but this is essentially what they've done. They've gone from being under the protection of God, the Father, and they've gone and they've thrown themselves on the mercy of the world. That's what's happened. And that's the kind of the point that he's trying to get across. That's the object lesson that he's trying to get across. All right, so continuing on, he's in verse 17. But when he came to himself, when he had that little spark, he said, you know what? I can do something. I can do something, but it's going to require something that I never thought I would have to do. You know, when this young man left, he didn't think he'd ever go back home. He didn't have no reason to. I have all the wealth I need. I have everything I desire. I can live for the rest of my life. The problem was he wasted his livelihood. He wasted it. But now he has this epiphany. I'm going to go back and I'm going to what? How many of my father's hired servants, not even in the position I'm in. I'm not even a hired servant. I'm just out here trying to make just feed myself is all I can do. But my father has hired servants. He pays them a wage. He takes care of them. Not only this, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare? They can not only provide for themselves, they provide for their family. These are people who work for my dad. So, I perish with hunger. He's looking, he's realized the state to which he has fallen. He says, I will arise and go to my father. And he's reasoning this out in his mind. And I wonder how many times he reasoned this out before he finally made the first step. How many times he thought about this and said, well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go, and I can't go. I'm going to go, and he stepped back again. And how many times he made that decision, this is it, I'm going. No, I'm not going to go. I don't know how many times. But you think about how many times people have said that about coming back to the Lord after they've gone away from the Lord. I'm going to go back. This Sunday I'm going to go and I'm going to go before the congregation. I'm going to make things right. Sunday morning comes up, and I just can't do it. They find excuses not to. It's too late. It's too early. Nobody's going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. I'm going to be embarrassed. Whatever the reason might be, but they find reasons not to go and do the very thing that they need to do to reestablish themselves. Okay. He says, I will arise and go to my father. So he starts reasoning this out. And he will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So that's his speech. And I imagine he worked over that speech several times on his way back to his dad's house, don't you think? He probably thought about this, well, maybe if I say this and if I do. Now, it would be very easy. It'd be very easy to look at this and say that he is simply coming about it from a pragmatic standpoint. All right? The only reason he's doing this is because he's starving. That's the only reason he's going back to his dad. It's not because he's really sorry. It's not because he even wants a relationship with his father. It's simply the fact that he is starving and he has no food. Now the question is this. Does it make it any less of a reason to go back? No. It makes it no less of a reason to go back. He knew that he was better off where he was before. And he knew that even if he went back as a hired servant, he would be better off than he is right now. Because where he is right now is no place to be. He's miserable. And it's not going to get any better for him at this point. He has nothing with which to live on. All of his livelihood is gone. So anything that he would have as some sort of an investment, some sort of seed money to do anything different is gone. The best that he can hope for is that his station will rise a little bit. But remember, you're in a bad situation anyway. There's a famine going on. There's no food anywhere. So he's as low as he possibly can go. And yeah, for the most part, he's just being pragmatic. I'm starving to death. I don't have any food. The pig food's not fit for human consumption. That's why the pigs are eating. If it was people food, people would be eating. So what do I need to do? I got to go back. Nothing here. These people don't know me. My name's not worth anything. I don't have anything else. The only place that they know me, here's where we get the key for us today. The only place they know me and that my name is worth anything is in my Father's house. That's the only place that I'll ever be accepted and I'll ever be taken care of. The only people that will receive me back are the people that I left in the first place. It speaks to us today, right? That makes sense. That's why we talk about the idea of church discipline, the idea of entreating people to come back, and the idea of of going after the lost, those who are members of the Lord's church have strayed away. One of the things that we have to be is we have to be a family, or else going to these people won't make a bit of difference if we don't have a relationship with them. Right? We have to have a relationship with the people that we're trying to bring back to the Lord. If I don't know them, if I've never known them for 1 second, and then I go back to them and say, we really want you back, rightfully they can say, who are you? You've never spoken a word to me before. I don't know you. You don't miss me. You never said a one word to me. So what does that matter? Well, here we go. The reason that he went back to his father's house is because his father and his family knew him. He knew that if nothing else, they would at least give him food to eat, and he wouldn't starve to death. So, sometimes we look at it as, well, he was just being pragmatic. He didn't want to starve to death. Yeah, and that's a perfectly good reason to go back. Makes perfect sense. All right. Okay, so he says, make me like one of your hired servants, because at least your hired servants have food. So he arose. He got up. I imagine he went, probably tried to get himself as presentable as possible, maybe washed his clothes a little bit and washed his body a little bit, and he started heading for home. No food. Don't know how far away he was. He said he went away to a far land, so who knows how long it took him to go back to his dad. Don't know. But he went, he started coming to his father, started heading towards his father. Now here's one of the things, and we talked about this, might have been almost a month ago. The mindset and the concept of the Jewish man of the time. Look at what he says happened. He says, while he was still a great way off, so pretty far off. Now, we don't know how far that is. Okay, don't know if his father was a distance off and he saw his son even further off, or if he was standing on the front porch. We always see it in the pictures. It's always described like he's standing on his front porch and he sees his son walking down the road. Don't know. He could have been in town and heard that his son was coming. Don't know. But this is the interesting thing about this. While he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion. So what was the father's mindset right off the bat? Yeah. The idea of compassion here is what? Having compassion for someone? Yeah. The idea of empathy and love and sympathy and all of those things. Why he had compassion on him? Well, for one thing, he was his son. So right off the bat, you got the issue of it was family. Another, you saw this young man for what he was, a dejected, rejected castaway. I mean, this is if you're living with the swine, if you're living out in the field with the swine, you're not dressed in the nicest of clothes. Can you imagine this is a big difference from how he left home? I imagine he left home riding on top of a donkey or a camel or a horse of some kind, and with all of the splendor of a young fella going off to seek his fortune, and I imagine he was very waving goodbye to his family, all the while they're mourning him leaving. He's projecting this majestic figure driving off or riding off into the sunset, and here he comes back on foot, probably barefoot, clothes in rags. Just, he probably still stank of the pigs, but here he is. He's coming back. He's probably going pretty slow, head hung. He's not coming back the proud conqueror. He's heading home, and his head is dejected, head hanging low. And here he comes. And his father sees him and has compassion on him. I imagine there's two things. One, he sees a young man that he loves dearly that has been beaten down by the world. The world has taken him in its mouth. It has chewed on him. It has gotten every bit of that possibly can out of him, and then it has spat him out onto the ground. So part of that is the idea of compassion, of seeing your son or your daughter, whoever it might be, having been brought down to their absolute lowest possible depth. This is as low as they can go. And here they come back. I watch those. I don't know if anybody else watches those shows. I've seen a few. I have a hard time watching them. Where they're, I remember what one of them is called. It's basically people who are doing rehab from drugs. Yeah, intervention. That was it. And you see these, they show these young people, and it's almost always young people, very young, 20s, maybe early 30s. These people are just in the grip of some sort of an addiction, whatever it might be. heroin or crack cocaine or methamphetamine, whatever it might be. These young people are just it's got a grip on them, and they've really, what's happened is they no longer make a pretense about it. They've given themselves over to it. They're very open about the fact that they'll do whatever it takes in order to get drugs, no matter what it is. They will humiliate themselves and they will debase themselves so that they can get these drugs. And what's so sad, what's it says, watching these young people act as if this is perfectly normal behavior, is watching the family members, watching their moms or their dads who know that their children are in the middle of this and they're in mourning. They are just they're so angry and upset and so disappointed and compassionate for their children. They'll still give them money for food, even though they know that money's going to be spent on drugs. They want to take care of their kids. They're so caught up, they're so swept up in what their children are engaged in and what they're trapped in. When I look at this is what I see. I see a father who is seeing his son come back, beaten down and chewed up by the world and spat back out again. And he has compassion on him. Still loves him. As disappointed as he was that his son decided to leave and take, and he knew going out that his son was going to do that. He knew. He knew. To see him come back the way that he was, it says he has compassion on him. But look just a little bit further. His father had compassion. And this last little bit is kind of a big deal. If thinking about the mindset of the Jewish man at that time, I said a while back that when for the Jewish man, the older they got, the more dignified their demeanor was. For a young Jewish man to break into anything other than a fast trot would have been understandable, but for an older fellow, for him to do anything other than slowly walk and be very graceful and have some dignity in his bearing would have been unthinkable. He was the one that was wrong. It would have been well within his right to sit at the house and wait for his son to come back and beg forgiveness. And it would have been well within his right to do so. That's not what we read. It says that he saw him afar off, he had compassion on him, and then what did he do? He ran. Now think about this. Here's this elderly Jewish man with dignity and grace and bearing, and what does he do? He picks up those robes and he says he starts running. He runs towards his son. And rather that before his son ever gets the first word out of his mouth, what does he do? He runs, he falls on his neck, the idea of collapsing, and then he gives him a kiss. All right. So what's happened is it's thrown the idea about how this man received his son back. Once again, he would have been well within his rights to sit, wait for his son to come, beg his forgiveness, and then it would have been a matter of a very, you've hurt me deeply, and you've hurt your mother, and you've hurt our family, you've brought shame to our name. It would have been well within his right to list, to start detailing his offenses against the family, but that's not what happened. Yes, sir. Do what now? No, sir. No. Nope. Nope. They restored one another. There was a restoration here. And that's important. There was a restoration of a family relationship. And that's at the core of this. This is the whole point of this. If you want just a theme of the two parables, it is that God loves the lost. He loves the lost. He loves this young man who ran away, and he also loves the older brother. And we'll get to that here in a second. You had something? Oftentimes, we internalize it sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes we internalize it. But at the end of the day, this was this young man's fault. It was not his father's. His father had done nothing to him. His father had not abused him or mistreated him. He had actually gone over and aboard because he did not have to give him the share of the goods that belonged to him. He was, it was within his rights as the patriarch to withhold that, and that came to him close to his father's death. He would bequeath a portion of that, and he could give it to him as he wanted. But he was indulgent towards his son. That doesn't necessarily be a bad thing. You can be indulgent. He gave his son what he asked for, knowing even then that he was going to do something foolish with it. But it says that he runs, and he has compassion first, then he runs, he falls on his neck, and then he kisses. So it kind of turns the idea about the relationship between that father, especially the culture of the time. The culture of the time, it turns it on its head. Because the people that were listening to this would have thought, why? That's unseemly. For a grown man to run to a son that betrayed him and that took his goods and went into a far country, wasted everything, and he comes back stinking of pigs and foreigners, idolatrous foreigners, and he comes back, and this is how he's going to act. That's the mindset behind it. But that's exactly what happened. And here comes the son. Here's the son. The son says to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Same thing as he practiced, right? So he's willing to go back into servitude. But at least he's going to serve a master that loves him. He's going to serve a master that will take care of him. He'll serve a master that he knows. It's always better to, the idea of the one you know is better than the one you don't know. That's always better. At least he knows how he'll be treated. In his mind, he's swapping one master for another. This one happens to be his father, who at least take care of him, at least provide for him. But the father's not content with that. And remember this, the father's the one that's not content with that relationship, not the son. The father says, no. That's not going to work for me. And look what he says. The father said to his servants, he doesn't say anything to his son. He says, the father says to his servants, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, meaning what? Signifies who he belongs to. Signifies a familial relationship. That signet ring was an important one. And likely that son had a ring before, but what happened to it? Sold for money. Is gone. That belongs to someone else now. Melted down for its gold or its metallic value, whatever it might be. So that robe that he had when he left, gone. That ring that he had when he left, gone. The sandals that he had on his feet, those were shod a long time ago. He got rid of those a long time ago. He's going back to his father barefoot. Otherwise he wouldn't need sandals on his feet. So everything that he had, but what the point to this is, even today, when we leave, when we are restored, how are we restored to God's grace? Totally. And whole and full. God does not say, I want you to come back, but you're going to occupy a lesser position until I deem you worthy of taking someplace else. When you come back to me, you're restored as a child of mine. There's no probationary period where you have to work yourself back up. When you come back to me, you will be restored as you were. You'll have the robe, you'll have the ring, you'll have the sandals. You belong to me. And that's what signified his belonging to his father. Right? And bring the fatted calf here. That was typical of the culture. You had animals that were being fatted up for slaughter, for feasting, or for special occasion. That was the usual case. That's nothing that was unusual here. Bring the fatted calf here and let us kill it, eat and be merry, for this my son was dead. That's how he considered him. Not that he was dead to him. Obviously not, because look how he restored him. He wasn't, you hear people say that, you're dead to me. I don't want to hear from you again. Once you leave this house, you're dead to me, and I don't want to hear from you again. That's not what he's talking about. He said that when that son was gone, he was as good as dead. He had turned his back on his family. He had given up everything. And that's what he means by that. Not that he was dead to his father, but his father considered him dead. He didn't know if he'd ever see him again. That's how important it was. But for this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. I like that, the idea. Remember we talked about the idea of, Jesus didn't really refer to people much as sinners. He referred to them as lost. So this is what's happened. The son was lost. Now he's been found. All right. So that's the parable of the prodigal son. Any questions about that before we get into the older son? Yeah. The idea here we talked about, he was simply being pragmatic, but look how he refers to himself. I've sinned. I've sinned. Part of that was the idea of making sure that his father knew he wasn't simply coming back and asserting his sonship. He was coming back and asserting that he had sinned. And look what he says, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. How did he sin against heaven? Yeah, he had broken with the tradition of the Jewish family. One thing, in taking that portion of his goods before it was supposed to come to him. That was not, you weren't supposed to do that. That was not supposed to be done. The father could do that if he chose to, but the idea of changing that up and breaking that tradition would have been unseemly. Not only that, he went and he wasted his parents' goods. So what is that? What does it say about honoring your father and mother? Did he honor his father and mother in the way that he behaved? No, certainly not. He did not honor them. So then he went and he wasted his money with his riotous living. Debauchery is what it typically goes to. And his older brother actually feeds into that here in just a couple of moments. But he had sinned against heaven and in his sight. So in both ways he had offended God and man in his behavior. Yeah. Yeah, everything that happened to him was his fault. Everything that happened to him was he was at the heart of it. He had made those decisions. His father would have been fine. Would have preferred him stay close to home, find a good wife close to home, live close to home, carry on the family businesses and take care of each other, and that's the way the family worked back then. But that's not what he did. He had made a great many bad decisions that led him down that path. Okay, so that's the son. Now let's look at this. Verse 25, this is the second parable. Now his older son, the man's older son, was in the field. What was he doing in the field? Taking care of his father's business, right? Whatever it was, he was in the field, doing what needed to be done. So this is one who had continued to be faithful to his father, continued doing the work. He hadn't forsaken his father. He stayed right where he was supposed to be, and this is the older son. He was right where he was supposed to be, taking care of things. So he was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. I always found that, I think this part of it leads into the idea why he was so upset. He was out in the field taking care of business, and they had already started a party without him. I mean, he comes by, and he already hears music and dancing. I think part of it shows the immediacy of the restoration of that young man. It was, I can't wait. We're not going to wait for him to come back. We're going to start it now. When he comes back, he can join in. That's how immediate that father felt the need to go ahead and begin to celebrate the return of his son. That's how important he found it. But it says, as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. What's going on? I don't know about any festival or any kind of party or any kind of feast that we're supposed to be having. What's happened? And he said to him, your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf. All right? So now he's been made aware of the situation. He knows basically what's happened. Even though he's got it from a third-party account, he knows what's happened. Verse 28, what does he say? He was what? The young man was what? Angry. Does any translation have wroth? Filled with wrath. I've seen some translations that have the word wroth. He was wroth and would not go in. Go in where? To the house where they were having the party. So he was angry. All right. Don't know yet why he's angry, but he's angry. Now, does he have reason to be angry? There's the thing. You think he has reason? Okay, why do you think he has reason to be angry? I'm just curious. What's your thought process? Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Right. Sure. Sure. Oh yeah. You have to look at this from a human standpoint because that's how it's being portrayed. He wouldn't have given the example of the older brother if that not have been a part of the way that we think. And what does it say? It says the older brother says he was angry. He became angry and he would not go in. So I can imagine that brother. Now, one of the things about the brother is he doesn't quite understand the father's view. Okay, I think that's key is because the father has to explain to him why he's doing this. Because the brother's thinking that he's celebrating, it's more along the lines of nothing's happened and everything, he's just it's not even like we're glad to have him back because let's look at this. He says, so therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. Pleaded with him what? Come in, take part in the celebration, right? Enjoy, eat the fatted calf. It's not for the son exclusively; it's for the family. So he goes out and he pleads with him. So he answered, this boy answers his father, and he says to his father, lo, these many years I have been serving you. I've been working. I've been doing the work. You've given me more responsibility, and I've lived up to that responsibility. I've done the work. I've never transgressed your commandment at any time. This goes right back once again, to that idea of the Hebrew mindset. The father has authority. And if you didn't want to abide by the father's authority, you needed to find another place. You could not stay if you were not going to be in subjection. It doesn't mean that he dictated every single aspect of your life, but at the end of the day, the father's decision was overrode everything else. He made the decisions for the family. That was a part of that patriarchal system. He says, I've never transgressed your commandment any time. That's basically, if you told me to do something, I went and did it. I've been the faithful son. I've been the one that's stuck with you. And how many times has that son thought about, I wonder when the younger brother left if he didn't think about the same thing. Maybe it's time for me to go and do, but he didn't. He stayed and did the work. He said, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with friends. And look how he says this. He doesn't say, but as soon as my brother came, he says, what? This son of yours, not my brother, this son of yours. So basically, he doesn't regard it. It's almost like he's not family. This son of yours, who has devoured your livelihood with what? Harlots. So he's jumping to that conclusion that his son, the brother, went away and wasted it on that kind of thing. He doesn't know that. I mean, we don't see anywhere where they were made aware of what he was doing in that far country. But he certainly has that figured in his mind that if he's coming back the way that he is now, it's because he went and he blew it all. And we don't know what this young man was like when he was growing up. He could have been the wild child that was never content to be under subjection to his parents. He could have been rebellious anyway. We don't know. We don't know the background. But if we don't know it, we can't cast aspersions that we don't have understanding of. But he does refer to him this. His son, as soon as this son of yours, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. You never gave me a goat or anything that I could make merry with my friends. But here you go and kill the fatted calf for this son of yours who's come back after he's wasted everything you've had. Sounds like us, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And is it necessarily wrong? Remember, the Scripture never says that we can't be angry. Never says that we can't be angry. And as a matter of fact, the Father doesn't say you shouldn't be angry. That's not what He says. He doesn't say you can't be angry. Christ said, be angry, but don't sin. Don't sin against a man or God in your anger. But it's okay to be angry. And I can imagine this young fellow was angry, and I imagine the father knew he was angry and knew why he was angry. But he says, and he said to him, and here he's trying to make this older son understand why he's done what he's done. It's not because he's celebrating his son's going away and blowing his living. It's not celebrating going and wasting his living with riotous living and harlotry and spending it and blowing everything that he had. It's not that he's hired himself out to a servant and ate pig food. He's not celebrating that aspect of it. Look what he says. He said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours." Right, that statement right there, it's stamped, and it should stamp on our mind that when we are faithful, when God, as this Father did, I've never transgressed against your commandment. I've been serving you all these many years. Look at what this is essentially what God says to us. You are always with me, and all that I have is yours. So immediately, we know that we are in a better place. And if we think about it that way, I would rather have the daily, everyday blessings of staying in faithful service to God than having all of the celebration for me to come back from sin. I'm thankful when people celebrate, when people are brought out of a sinful state and brought back to the Lord's body, are restored. I think that's good. We're supposed to do that. We're supposed to be happy about something like that. But I would rather live my daily life not transgressing against the commandments of God, staying with Him in His service and all of those things than celebrate the coming out of sin. And what this father is doing, he's making sure that young man, that his son, knows that you've never left me. You are with me. Everything I've got is yours. You know, if you want a fatted calf, you go get a fatted calf. It's yours. What I have is yours. You want to kill a goat and eat it with your friends? It's yours. It belongs to you. I'm not going to forbid you that. But it was right that we should make merry and be glad. And this is why. This is why. Your brother was dead and is alive. It's as if he came back from the dead. They didn't know where he was, by all accounts. They didn't know he was alive. By all accounts, he was dead, and in fact, he's alive. He was lost and is found. Once again, not sin. He's not a sinner. He was lost. He was gone. He was away from the family. He was away from everything that is important, and we've received him back again. I wonder, we're not given some sort of a long, 10 years from now we find out a little bit more. We're not given that. The only thing we can know is that this family is celebrating because someone that they thought was gone for good has come back. And how many times have we celebrated over someone coming out of sin and coming back to the Lord's body? And we thought they would never do that. Years have gone by. We thought they're dead. Their hearts are cold. They're hard. They're not going to turn. They're not going to do anything. And all of a sudden, here you see them. They come in that back door, and man, when the invitation song is sung, they walk up to the front and they make that confession that I've messed up. I've been in sin for years and years and years, and I want to make things right. Are we excited about it? Oh, yeah. But everybody else that's sitting in that pew that hasn't left, always obeyed the commandments, and have always been with Him, God said, you're always in my good grace. But it doesn't change the very human aspect of it. I'll look at myself as that. I'd be fuming, because that mindset is, it's. I don't know if he thinks he's celebrating his behavior, and that may be part of what he's reading into it. Yeah.
About his brother returning to the fold.
Yep.
I think that's the part he missed. He didn't have compassion of his brother coming back.
Yeah.
It's like unfortunately, there are some members of the church feel that way when somebody's been out for 3 or 4 years, and then, we were glad to have him back, and I said, well, why are you making a big deal about it? He's been out, I think he should have known better.
Now let's think about this just a little bit further. You think about after that younger son left, what do you think his parents were doing? Mourning his loss. He was gone. He'd left. He had they had no idea where he was. So what does that older son watching his parents do? Suffer and grieve. And as they talk about it, and he becomes more and more angry with his brother for doing what he's done to his parents. And he's like, if I could catch him, this is the third time this week Mom has sobbed herself to sleep. My father has lost a lot of his interest in all of the things that are going on. He every day he goes out on that porch and looks to the horizon looking for my brother. And then pretty soon, he stops viewing him as his brother. He just refers to that guy, that boy, that young man, that son of theirs. Yeah. And that's what he may have had compassion at the beginning, but that compassion has slowly eroded. And one of the things we can take away from this is that God never loses His love for the lost. Looking for him, always looking for him. And when we come back to Him, He doesn't make us come back and grovel and lose our place. When He sees us coming, figuratively, of course, He comes running out after us. And when we come back to Him, He puts the ring back on our finger, He puts the shoes on our feet, He puts the robe on our back, He kills the fatted calf, the angels in heaven rejoice, and He makes merry because one of His lost children has come back to Him again. And it's tough for us to do because sometimes we see what people do, and we feel as if when we act excited that somehow we've excused their behavior. We're making light of what they've done because they've hurt a lot of people. They've hurt God. They've hurt people in the congregation, and the sin was just too egregious, and we have a hard time a lot of times bringing up that idea of compassion and sympathy. If we make a big deal out of them, they'll think that it was okay for them to do it. And that's sometimes the way that we look at things. And it's hard for us to change that. Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's we've heard things and we don't know exactly what it was, and we think things were worse than they are. At the end of the day, sin is sin, but sometimes we tend to inflate it in our own minds. But Jesus wouldn't have put the brother in there if there was not an application for the brother. The application is us. We're human. We tend to get frustrated. We get angry. We may lash out. The brother didn't go in there and start castigating the other son, did he? He hung out on the outside. Wasn't going to make a big deal, but he wasn't going to go in. I'm going to celebrate it, but I'm not going to go in there and tip over the punch bowl. So
he knew that everything that was there, that was left, was his. Mm-hmm. His dad said that he divided it, and the younger son probably didn't get as much as he got.
No,
because the tradition was the older son got
double
most
portion
of the estate.
Yeah.
So he still had most of it.
Yeah.
And it was his. His dad gave it to him. He said he divided his livelihood.
Yep.
So anytime he wanted to kill a fatted calf, he could have.
I think it was the fact that the father didn't go out and command the fatted calf to be killed for him. He says it was yours anyway. Yeah, it's yours. If you want to make one, if you want to kill one, kill one. So God loves the lost, right? And that's our takeaway from it. God loves the lost. Yeah. No, so what we have to do is, like it says, we're silent where it's silent, but I like to think that the older brother kind of came to his senses, maybe cooled off a little bit, and then finally came in and maybe even restored the relationship between him and his other brother, that son of theirs. Maybe started referring to him as a brother again.
You look at it more in the terms of what the father was saying as salvation. forgiveness
Mm-hmm.
instead of earthly things.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, look at what he says. I mean, he makes the point that because look how his father refers to him. He says, your brother. Now, the brother said it's their son. He says, that son, your son, your son, your son. But look how the father refers to him as your brother. He's making sure that he understands the relationship. It's not just my son, that's your brother. He was dead. By all accounts, for everything we knew, he was dead.
He had fallen away.
Yeah, he was dead. I mean, when we're dead in our sins, that means we've fallen away and we haven't come to repentance. So we're dead. And that's what's so important. When we see somebody coming back up here, when we see somebody respond to the invitation, or we hear about that someone has made right an error, we know that somebody has come back from the dead. They've come back from their being dead in their sin. And we should be as happy about that as we can be about anything else. Should be. Not always that case. Sometimes we have to work on it, especially if that person has hurt us personally. You know, when we restore someone, we're supposed to restore them fully, but when they've hurt us personally, it's a little bit harder to do that, isn't it? You know, and I imagine that older brother probably felt that his brother had betrayed him. You know, I don't know what their relationship was, but here he was, gone. So, yeah, it's very much an idea of salvation versus destruction, right? Condemnation. Anything else? All right. All right, next week we're going to talk about the two sons, not these two sons, another two sons. And we'll work our way through it.
So you got two more sons?
No, we're going to do another parable about two sons.
Okay, who are they?
They don't have a name.
Oh.
They don't have a name. They're just two guys, two boys, both of them being asked to do something, and they have different ideas about what that is.
Oh.
Before we have the invitation, is there anyone that needs to take communion? I think everybody was here this morning. I don't think we do. We're going to have a song of invitation, and if you need to respond to that, come while we stand and while we sing.
Oh, do not let the word depart.